Hello everybody, and welcome to this brief overview of Project 1. I wanted to create this video for you so you would see what I was looking for in terms of the solutions and how things should be done. And so if you open up the initial spreadsheet, I asked you to do some formatting. Some formatting that I was looking for is that you change this area of your spreadsheet to 18 point and center that across the area here. So that looks good. Then I wanted to have a green heading across this your tables, and so that should have been done on all of your tables. And so I believe that was part 7 for formatting. So most everybody got all the points for that. Then I'm just going to stay on this page for right now. I think number 5 was put in the date. And so I was asking or looking for a formula. I didn't count off any points, but there were several of you that just literally typed in this value for the date and formatted as text. That's not what I was looking for. And when you use a date inside a spreadsheet, you should probably enter that in with a function so that you can do some calculations with it later on if need be. The other thing on this fleet work book, or sheet I should say, is I was looking for this if function. So if this value here is greater than or equal to 8, put in a yes here, otherwise put in a no. So that's what the formula looks like right here. Some of you put greater than 8, and so that's not quite correct, so only 9 would work there. Some of you looked at the other option and changed it the other way around. If it's less than 8, then put in a no, otherwise put in a yes. So depending on how you use your logic, that's what you would get here, but these are the correct answers. Then for step 8, I was looking for a model. And what I mean by model, again, if you haven't watched the video from the previous week, is that you want the user to do some kind of what-if analysis. That is, change the values in the model in order for the function to work properly. So you don't want to just hard code all of the values in this payment function. So what the user should be able to do, and this is how I tested it, is I looked up 1180, and 1180 is this value right here. So it pulls 725. The hard interest rate here is 7%, but I could change that to 6 and see what the value would be in my formula. So that's how we're modeling it. Years was 1, so that's actually 12 months because we're doing monthly payments. And so that explains why you're multiplying by 12 right here. Right? And so hit escape to get out of that. So if I wanted to do 3 years, I could put that in, and that would be the monthly payment for 3 years. So just finding the payment on these full day rates. So that's what I was looking for on that page. Then in terms of this page, I'm looking for a formula like this in this cell so that if I double click here, it should copy it all the way down and I get the right values. If you didn't do that correctly, I would get, I'll just show you. Let's say you put a $ in front of the D, you kept that constant or absolute, and you did something like that. Well, that looks correct there, but if I copy it down now, I get hashtags, which tells me I got some huge number, and that's not correct. So I'm going to hit F4 here, cycle around until I get what I want. And now if I copy this down, it should be correct. Now if this is done correctly and you understand the difference between relative and absolute addressing, I should be able to do Control C, Control V, copy copy it there, and copy it all the way down again. Now that won't work here because now I'm using full day rates, and so that formula is this with F being relative, and over here the 5 being relative. But you should be able to copy that over to here, and it updates the formula, and I can copy it down, and if I don't get any errors, then I know you've done it correctly. So that's what I was looking for in terms of calculations and functions here. Then on the last worksheet, I was just very simple looking for you to fill in this E5 to D5 and divide that. And so I guess just as a side note, anytime you see per, P-E-R, in a written out question for you to do a calculation, that means to divide. So the revenue per passenger, so you got the total fees or your revenue divided by 4. Some of you multiplied and that got you the wrong values. Now a couple of you asked about this area of the worksheet, and I said don't worry about it, you don't have to fill it in. And I said if you wanted to try, you could use COUNTIF and SUMIFs to see if you could get this information. I saw maybe 2 or 3 of you tried to solve this, and what you did was, I'm not sure where you got the answers, but you did an array formula and you looked up each of these specific items here in order to get this. And so I just wanted to show you how this can be done very easily, and what you'll see here you should be able to use throughout your career. So I've typed in this formula here and I wanted to see how this works. So I'm going to use the COUNTIF, and when I use COUNTIF, the first part that it's asking for is the range that I want to count something in. And so that's this range here where I have all the boat types. And then the second part is the criteria. The criteria is going to be anything that's in front of being 2, which is the C27 reference, and anything that comes afterwards. So I'm going to get the 40, the 373, and so on. Now, if I've done this correct, I'm going to copy this down, and this number should add up to 15 because that's how many we've got here is 15 records, and we are covering everything in these names. So when I looked at this earlier, it's like, okay, I didn't come up with 15. What did I do wrong? And so it took me a second, but what I did wrong is I didn't make this range absolute. So notice it's C5 to C19. Well, the next one, it's C6 to C20 and so on. So it keeps changing. I don't want that range that I'm looking in to change every time. So I'm going to hit the F4 key. Come over here, hit the F4 key again, and that puts it in absolute. If I hit F4 again, it puts it in front of the row. If I hit it again in front of the column, if I hit F4 again, it takes it all the way out. That is absolute addressing. So I want it to be absolute, the first cell and the last cell. Now when I copy it down, you see it adds up to 15. So now I've got the correct number. Now I want to know how much in terms of revenue do we have here for each of these boat types. So again, instead of using COUNTIF, I'm going to use SUMIF. So I'm going to copy this over. So I'm going to hit Control C, Control V. Notice C5, C19 is the same. This D27 got changed, so I'm going to change that back to C, because that's what I want to reference here. That's my criteria that I want to look up. Now I don't want COUNTIF. I want to use SUMIF. So now it's got, the first part is the range that I want to look in. It's got to match the criteria, and if it matches, I've got to add what's the range that I want it to pull values out of. That's the range. I'm going to hit F4 here because I want to keep that absolute. And now I'm going to copy that down. And if I make that $sign, formatted as $sign, you get that. So what it's done is, if we look up here and we look at into, let's do this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. If I were to sum these values in this column, this total fees column, that should be our 3,400. Right? So I'll just say plus this, plus that, plus this. Just copy this down. So that's all my values that match the same. So now if I hit the auto sum, and drag that up, and then you can see that's a match. So whenever you're using these sum ifs, count ifs, those criteria type functions, do your due diligence and double check. Make sure it's getting the right numbers and that you've logically thought about those functions correctly. And that ends my overview for this first project.